If you're a white man, you don't get to define what racism is.
Oh, I see. I don't
really
get to define it.
So a man who's been racist, you don't get to sit there and say that he hasn't been racist when objectively he has.
Do you know
and it's not about your opinion. The objective things. Racism is an objective reality, and Donald Trump has inhabited that reality. The point is the KKK exists. The KKK endorsed Donald Trump. The KKK stands for white supremacy, and that has to be acknowledged. That has to...
Amanda, with what you've understood of this, you've written about America, you've even written the fictional Trump and Melania story. This seems to be about progress, doesn't it? About different people's understanding of what progress is.
Progress? No, it's not about progress to me. Maybe I don't understand the question.
Give me your take, because it seems that people who voted for Donald Trump thinks that progress is what he offers in terms of the economics, and people who don't vote for Donald Trump think he's pulling social progress backwards.
I would be with the latter. But I think it's important. I mean, for me, what I think this has shown is that there are different kinds of populism. I think that the underlying idea to this election has been that a certain group in the US feel that they have been economically disadvantaged and ignored, and I think that's valid and true. I also think that's really a result of a larger sort of capitalist system that both parties have embraced. But I think what's very troubling to me is that we can find that idea valid without accepting other ideas that have propelled Trump to his success. And so populism doesn't have to be as dark and ugly as it has been with Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders rode a wave of populism. It wasn't dark, it wasn't ugly, it didn't involve misogyny and racism.
So what do you think people voted for there? The xenophobia of his rhetoric or the economics of his promises?
I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that they're all intertwined, and I think that's what's troubling.
Bob, what is your sense then of where we are and what people put first in America?
First of all, I think that a large element in this election was Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton was found wanting by the American people on a number of issues. She lied repeatedly before the grand jury, before the FBI inquiry, before the House of Representatives.
So this isn't an endorsement then of Donald Trump and what he's said?
Well, I think this is interesting. When I was over in London for the Spectator's debate, I made a point of raising this issue, her repeated lies about Benghazi, and to the parents of the victims. And I noticed in the Washington Post this morning, they agreed this didn't go down very well. And so there's that. And then there's her misuse of her server, and the two areas of...
But hang on a second, we're at a point where Donald Trump has won the election. Talk to me about what Donald Trump has actually offered and why he was voted in. This wasn't just anti-Hillary.
No, I didn't say it was only anti-Hillary, but I think it's got to be remembered that the American people voted against someone and they voted for someone. And that the fact that they voted against Hillary is substantial. I mean, that she ran a race that will be considered a great piece of a great learning operation for the Democrats. But let me, if you want to know what I think about Donald Trump, I think he's an indefatigable campaigner. He's the greatest campaigner I've seen in my lifetime. And I started with Bob Kennedy. Bob Kennedy was a terrific campaigner. He was probably the greatest campaigner since...
And Chimamanda, we've looked at America now, if you like, at a crossroads where there was an ideal which it represented. You know, bring me your huddled masses, bring me your poor. Do you think now there is a rejection of being that sort of place? Does it feel to you America has changed?
I feel quite numb. I felt quite numb since the elections, and I think I felt numb because I was genuinely surprised. And I wasn't surprised because I live in some sort of liberal bubble where I felt. I was just surprised because I felt that people would reject the package in which Donald Trump's message came, right? So that the idea that there are people who, the sort of populism, that idea that there are people who've been neglected and we need to look out for them, I think is valid. But what is shocking to me and what has made me feel so numb, and sad and angry, is that it seems that people who have accepted this idea also accepted the other things. I mean, we can talk about lying. and talk about a person who has consistently been shown to lie about big things and small things. And so to somehow suggest that Hillary Clinton was not, and by the way, we should also say that she actually was voted for by more Americans numerically than
in the
Donald
popular
Trump.
vote.
So there isn't a question somehow that nobody voted for her.
Bob, you're raising your eyes when you hear this. What is going through your
head? I don't really
head?
respond to an election the way this lady does. I don't respond to it emotionally. I'm looking at the evidence, and the evidence suggests that there was a reason for this.
But doesn't it worry you when you hear the kind of protectionist, isolationist rhetoric because you don't believe it or you don't
First of all, I don't believe it's protectionist. I don't believe it's isolationist. I believe we're going to have a very active foreign policy. I believe that Donald Trump is going to be in the great line of American internationalists. They started with Arthur Vandenberg in 1948. And they've continued.
And isn't that the point? You have to give them a chance now. You have to embrace what democracy has chosen.
I'm sorry. This is absolutely absurd. We can't create an alternate universe where the real Donald Trump doesn't exist. He campaigned as a man who is protectionist, who actually doesn't abide with many of the traditional conservative values. Who does not? And so to somehow suggest that he's going to be some sort of internationalist doesn't make sense. And can I actually say that I find it patronizing to be told that I respond to things emotionally, and that somehow doing that means that I don't respond to things in a way that looks at evidence. We are talking about, we're talking about Donald Trump who's been shown to lie over and over, and that there's evidence for that. So to somehow say that, to point that out, is to be emotional, I think is just really absurd.
We're going to hang on to that thought for our next chat. Let's go to our panel right here, Bob and Chimamanda. The first ever black president will be followed by a president who's endorsed by the KKK, Bob. Where does that leave you?
Could you pick some? I can't imagine anybody more marginal to American elections than the KKK. I mean, every 4 years, the KKK comes up because people like Hillary Clinton want to bring the KKK up.
So it doesn't shock you, it doesn't horrify you. They're holding a rally in December to celebrate his victory.
Yeah, and so are probably the Knights of Columbus. Now, why don't you talk about the Knights of Columbus? Maybe you don't even know.
Another.
It's the largest Catholic organization of Catholic males in the country. Let me just point out to you, it's inappropriate to talk about the KKK in the same sentence as Donald Trump or any Republican. They're utterly marginal. They wouldn't even exist if it weren't for every 4 years you trot them out.
Chimamanda.
Go ahead. Let me hear what you have to say about that.
You know, I find it really interesting. It seems to be a refusal to accept reality. So she's asked a question about the KKK, and it hasn't been engaged with, and instead we're being told that there's this other group called the Knights of St. Whoever. The point is the KKK exists. The KKK endorsed Donald Trump. The KKK stands for white supremacy, and that has to be acknowledged. That has to be pushed back on.
Is there nothing on the campaign trail that he said about race that hit you?
Yeah.
Did you worry about any of it?
No. In fact, you people keep magnifying it. The left in America and the left in Great Britain keeps magnifying it. But he talked about a lot of other things. And those things should get through.
And that is possible.
I mean, this is ridiculous.
If you have a fifth of Latinos or Hispanics voting for Trump all the same, maybe race wasn't an issue, even to the people he
I find that
talked
argument to be very troubling. The idea somehow that if Hispanic or even any people of color vote for somebody who's racist, it means he's not racist. I mean, every system of oppression has people who are in the group of the oppressed who somehow contribute to that oppression. So it doesn't even, it's not even a valid argument to make that because Hispanics voted for him, therefore. I think what we should do is look at Trump for who Trump has told us and shown us that he is. So let's look at what he said on the campaign trail. That's really what, because the only way we can judge the kind of president he will be is based on the campaign that he ran.
But maybe he didn't believe anything that he said, and maybe that's how you win a
But then that's the
primary.
problem, because on the one hand, we're told that Trump's appeal is that he says what he thinks and he says it like it is and that sort of thing.
Oh, but
and then on the other hand, we're told that somehow he doesn't really mean it. So which is it? There's something very troubling about that.
No, I'd
Most
say something
Republicans,
entirely
even Paul
different.
Ryan, have accepted that Trump Trump has been racist in his language. You don't.
That's not true. He hasn't been racist.
Textbook racism is the phrase
let me
he
tell you,
used.
because of the, you're going to say this is
if
because
you're a
of the,
white man, you don't get to define what racism is.
Oh, I see. I don't
you really
get to
don't.
define it.
So a man who's been
have a
racist,
false consciousness?
you don't get to sit there and say that he hasn't been racist when objectively he has.
Do you know
and
what-
it's not about your opinion. The objective things. Racism is an objective reality, and Donald Trump has inhabited that reality.
Do you know the false consciousness, which is the theory you're talking about, is a Marxist concept? And I have, in other words, I can't even open my mouth here because I'm a white male.
No, of course you can. I'm just saying to you that Donald Trump has shown us and has said things that are objectively racist.
No, he has
it's not
not.
about my emotion. But how
What
can you
has he
say that?
said?
If he says to us, for example, that a judge, a United States judge, is unable to judge him fairly because he is Mexican, that is racist.
I wonder-
Objectively
I'm
racist.
sorry,
We're nearly
but
at the end of
looked
our-
at Judge Curiel, and he didn't look any other color than my color.
But that's not the
Yeah,
point.
well, it is the
It's
point.
about what your candidate
I'm
said.
going to move this on just for a final thought, which is, will Donald Trump govern in the same way that he campaigned?
No.
And that's a
He's
good
not
thing or a
gonna-
bad thing?
It's a proper thing. He showed you how he's going to govern starting the other night when he was dignified, charming, and very focused.
Chimamanda.
I think it's very sad. I think the standards have been so lowered for Donald Trump that because he manages not to behave like a spoilt child, he needs to be praised. I mean, it seems to, in some ways, this is kind of a crude analogy, but it's kind of like, throwing a little tantrum and letting a little child drive a very sophisticated car. And so to say to us that we have to disregard everything that Donald Trump said and did during his long campaign and judge him just on the one day after he had won the election doesn't make sense.
What did he say that was so
Chimamanda
racist?
Ngozi Adichie, Bob Tyrrell, thank you
I'd
very
like to
much
know.
indeed.
We'll talk about
We've
this
run out of
later.
time.